Um, Hello, everybody. I'm Joe Belisle from the Lighthouse LGBTQ youth group at Kids in Crisis, and we are doing a very important panel discussion today entitled Speaking Up for LGBTQ Youth in a World Walking Backwards. I'll introduce our panelists in a moment, but we felt that this was so important to do at Kids in Crisis because there are over 300 anti-LGBTQ laws currently in the legislative process right now. And it's just an alarming time. The people in the LGBT community, me being one of them, are just feeling inundated with just so many threats from so many different places. So we'll get into it in a little bit about what's going on, but I just would like to take a moment to thank the Ferguson Library for their help with this. We appreciate you being the tech support and our support for this. It's really wonderful. Thank you, of course, to Kids in Crisis, who oversees my LGBTQ Lighthouse group here in Fairfield County. And thank you to our three panelists who are joining us today. Unfortunately, Charnel Bush had a family emergency and couldn't join us, but we are joined today by Connecticut State Representative Rahib Ali Brennan. Hello, welcome. Rahib proudly represents Connecticut's 2nd Assembly District in the state's House of Representatives, having first been elected in November 2018. After graduating from Bethel Public Schools in 2009 and Marymount Manhattan College in 2013, Rahib worked as a policy advisor in the U.S. House of Representatives. He is one of only 2 openly gay members of the General Assembly and has been instrumental in advancing proactive LGBTQ policy. In 2019, he successfully led floor debate on legislation to establish a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer health and human services network to make recommendations to the state about how to work toward a safer, healthier environment for the LGBTQ community. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so happy you could be here. Our next panelist is Representative Jeff Curry. Hello, Jeff. Thank you so much for being here with us. Jeff is a lifelong resident of East Hartford by way of County Limerick, Ireland. He is currently serving a 4th term representing the 11th Assembly District of Connecticut. Jeff is a Deputy Majority Leader chairing the Screening Committee on behalf of Majority Leader Rojas and serves on the Appropriations, Education, and Judiciary Committees. Starting in 2022, starting in the 2022 legislative session, Jeff will serve as House Chair of the Commerce Committee. He has been a longtime champion of LGBTQ rights. One example of this is his working towards the passage of a ban on the gay and transgender panic defense, expansion of LGBTQ youth access to HIV prevention medication, and the creation of an LGBTQ health and human services network. During the 2021 session, Jeff successfully advocated for the inclusion of an additional $500,000 for this initiative. Thank you for that. And finally, we have Abigail Sinawa, who is a proud transgender senior at AITE in Stamford, Connecticut. Abigail is also a member of AITE's GSA and debate team, and is going to a very prestigious college in September to study biomedical engineering. Abigail is also a member of AITE for AB, a student panel dedicated to making student voices heard and represented. Abigail also has a dog, Roman, who Abigail insists is the world's most beautiful dog. Thank you so much, Abigail, for being here. We really appreciate your time. So as I was saying before, there are over 300 anti-LGBTQ laws that are currently in the legislative process right now nationally in many US states. For example, the Don't Say Gay law in Florida and the disturbing new legislation in Texas, where a judge halted a recent directive that authorized child abuse investigations into parents who let their transgender children medically transition. But a Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton says they can continue. So this is an open question to all of the panelists. Anybody who wants to jump in is welcome to answer. But what, if anything, can we do to help prevent these laws from creeping into our state here in Connecticut? Anybody want to take that?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And appreciate the second time around when you mentioned the over 300 bills, you made sure to note that that was nationally. So I didn't want folks to think that originally that was in Connecticut, because in Connecticut, we're actually fortunate where we don't have any of those bills before the legislature. And a lot of that is due in part to the work that my better half of the LGBT caucus and I are able to do with our colleagues through education, through socialization, through further education. And I think that is exactly what we can all be doing to ensure that those bills don't come before us. You know, we talk about the Don't Say Gay bill down in Florida, and what that means for children in those earliest of grades, in which that is the time when you want to normalize and socialize you know, the families that make up our communities. And I think that unfortunately folks have taken a turn into over sexualizing our community and not fully understanding what it means when we talk LGBTQ curriculum. You know, it may mean something as simple as a book that you're reading where little Susie in it doesn't have a mom and dad. Little Susie has two dads, and it doesn't involve some great tremendous conversation with the entire classroom. It just is something that is, and then becomes something that continues to be. And so when a child grows up and they see that, and that's something that's completely normal, that they don't question it, they don't judge it as anything other than what it is and how it's presented to them. And so I think, you know, it goes a long way in just, you know, educating, socializing, normalizing, and ensuring that we won't see those types of legislation in front of us here in Connecticut.
Yeah, and I would just add, besides the haters, Representative Curry and I are here making sure that those laws are not happening and not being brought up in the legislature. But, vilifying the LGBTQ plus community has become more than just hate speech. It's become a convenient political strategy. And, throughout history, we know that isolating and targeting people that are different has been effective. So it's up to all of us to kind of remain vigilant. Obviously for Representative Curry and I, that means being representatives in the state General Assembly. For some, it may be having those hard conversations with like family and friends who don't understand what it means to be trans or why we need to have history of LGBTQ plus people in our education system. I think they're uncomfortable, but when people are genuine and they want to learn more, it's good to engage and remember that, we all come from different backgrounds and it's important to have that conversation. And also just sometimes it's just being who you are that's helping to push back, not being afraid to be the sassy, representative from Bethel that I am, and, not being afraid to be who you are. That's all part of it. So we all have a part to play. And that's how I think we can remain and push back on that type of rhetoric.
Yeah, I agree that, these battles are often won on the personal level. As I run an LGBTQ youth group, I've been doing it for 10 years. And I often, tell parents, I put my life on a platter for kids to see. I'm a gay man married to a man, and we have an adopted daughter. And, for her, it's been normal. This is who her family is. And she talks about her family and she talks about gay dads. And I think about if we lived in Florida, she couldn't talk about her own family. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous that it's just insane. But, families look different. And I think being out and being proud and being truthful about who we are is so important now more than ever. And I think in a lot of cases, these battles are won on a very personal level, just by being who we are and being out about it.
Absolutely. It's, I'm a high school student. It's, easy to think about that, the problem lies within the laws, and it's just the laws, and you just have to hope that your lawmakers are good enough. That's not true enough. The battle is half laws and half culture. And how does culture spread? Culture spreads through education. So to get involved, to try to fix a lot of these things, it can easily be done on a smaller level, appealing to Board of Education districts, going to your Board of Education, speaking at their meetings to try and get more inclusivity, emailing superintendents, doing things like that will show to school districts that, as a student or as a parent, you really care about this education, that you really care about getting this done. And when the education cares, when the education is giving proper information, then culture can properly adapt and culture can properly adjust.
Well said. Thank you. That's great. So that gets into my next question, which is, I feel like Connecticut has good laws and protections in place for the LGBTQ community, but local school boards and towns have power, obviously, at the local level. How do we best protect our kids at the local level?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the conversation that we're hearing right now has to do with, providing parents the ability to have a say in almost everything right now. And I think we're getting away from what the public school systems or our school systems have been set up for, and that is essentially a safe place and environment in which our children are sent to learn and to be educated, and to allow professionals, our teachers, to simply do their job. And when we have, I think, parents coming in trying to micromanage that and not placing their trust, it's so kind of insane to think that we went from a period during COVID where teachers were celebrated. They were the best thing. So they were doing it for everybody. And then all of a sudden we have flipped this script that they are indoctrinating our children and they're pushing agendas on them. I mean, you talk to the students and I mean, Abigail is hopefully going to let us know this. That's not happening in our schools. It's not. And if it is, and if it's that one-off educator or staff member, that's being called out and that's being addressed on a local level internally. But you're always going to have the vocal minority who's going to make the most noise at this level. And so we have to be able to stand up, speak out, and overcome and basically overcome that noise and find a way to ensure that folks realize that that simply should just be white noise, and to focus on what's important when it comes to what's going on within our schools.
Yeah, and I agree. And also, I just think, when we're prioritizing, we talk about the pandemic and mental health and, just things that have happened, and, recognizing that we need to do a lot with academic recovery in the wake of the pandemic, just paramount that, our standards also promote inclusivity and respect for every child. And, that includes the LGBTQ plus community. And we're not seeing that. I mean, as people try to remove one group, that's already suffering, it's going to make things even worse. So I think there's advocacy that has to happen on the local level as well. And, parents and students speaking up about why it's important.
Agreed.
And it's, I think it's really important that we do get this inclusivity in schools, right? I know I was, there's another panel that I participated on with Joe about, maybe a month ago, for Stanford Public Schools trying to get a book that was, heavily queer representative into the curriculum that the Board of Ed, that there was a lot of resistance against by the Board of Ed. And it's so important because, again, as right, Jeff Curry had mentioned, there was a lot of, that there's a kind of an overreach of parents into the education system. And yes, parents are very influential in their children's lives. However, a lot of parents are uninformed and a lot of parents are misinformed about the LGBTQ plus community, about the queer community. And so that's why it's important to, and that's why it's so important to get this kind of information representation in our schools. I know on a personal level, when I, came out to the world that I was transgender, I had to explain what that word meant to a fellow senior in high school. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we need representation early on, so that, we get adjusted, so that we as, queer people don't have to be walking dictionaries for the rest of society. We can just be prepared to be a part of the society in the first place.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, and I'm really glad that you touched on that, Abigail, is that we talk about educating our peers within and what's going on within the LGBTQ community, because I think folks forget that we are one of, if not the youngest human rights kind of campaign that is up and coming. And so a lot of our language and terminology, it's all very fluid, and it's all being experienced for the first time in many venues. And so it's incumbent upon us to kind of help better educate those folks at all levels, and to ensure that when there is that understanding, you're hopefully going to see less of that hate and that vitriol, which stems from just simply fear and the not knowing what is. So I think that's very important.
Mm. I just want to remind, I see we have a number of participants in the webinar, and you are welcome to ask questions. I will get the questions. You can type them in the chat box, and I'm happy to ask them to our panelists. So feel free to type in a question. So moving on, I feel like, you know, I feel like this personally, but I feel like we all as a community must become hyper vigilant, which creates a certain kind of PTSD and victimization. Like, what can we do? I'm sort of scratching my head about this. I feel like every day I wake up and I go, oh no, I have to check the news and see what's going on. I get an ulcer reading about, you know, what's going on in Texas and Idaho and all these different places. Like, how do we protect ourselves from, you know, sort of this cumulative bad news?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rob.
Okay. No, I mean, I just, not to go back to, I mean, like you mentioned, being hyper vigilant. I think, yeah, it becomes exhausting, right? You have to kind of always have your guard up. You know, what's next, what's coming out of Texas, what's coming out of Florida. I think first of all, you have to focus on your own mental health and, you know, make sure you're taking those breaks. We can't always be on. Find out what's healthy for you, and just being able to take a step away. But like I said, I think you have to find ways that, like I said, for Reps Curry and I, you know, we work on this advocacy level. There's different advocacy levels to be involved and to make sure that you're helping push back, whether that's on social media, whether that's being visible, whether it's having the conversation with your family, or you know, really getting involved in the political process. I think it's not easy, but we're kind of all in this together. And I think finding your tribe and making sure that you're, you know, engaging with the various groups and networks are in the state that have safe places. That's kind of where you can find your tribe and kind of commiserate with each other. I mean, that's how we get through this, right? By having these conversations. And so obviously today's important, but we're also here we're exhausted, right?
Yeah.
But we have
to find
to
your tribe. I like that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Representative Valley Brennan touched on it. It's important to find, and that we're providing safe people, places, and programs throughout the state, so that folks have a place to turn to. And that was the impetus for advocates coming forward and for helping Connecticut become the first state to statutorily create that LGBTQ Health and Human Services Network, which, with the intent to close some of those service deserts. Connecticut is small, so it is absolutely just amazing that we have these giant areas throughout Connecticut where someone simply can't find somewhere safe to go to speak with within kind of a 5-10 mile radius. I mean, some people are having to get on buses for an hour and a half just to simply find a health provider that specializes in the care that they may need at that time. So, you know, ensuring that we have those kind of safe spaces and places is going to really help us kind of overcome this. But yeah, find your tribe and help yourself get down with them. That's the best way you can do this.
That's a great point. And I just want to add, you know, symbols matter, and waving a rainbow flag or just putting one up. You know, a quick story about we meet in Greenwich and we have Lighthouse LGBTQ meetings at a church, and the church put up a pride flag and it said something like, "We welcome LGBTQ families," or something. A mother walked, drove by the church, saw the flag, long story short, got my email and started sending her kid to Lighthouse meetings. And she was so worried about her kid. And, you know, the kid felt completely alone. The mother felt completely alone. They didn't know what to do, but they saw the rainbow flag, and it really, it helped them. It saved this family. And, you know, the kid came and saw, you know, there were a dozen kids in the meeting that night, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, I never knew that this even existed." So symbols matter, and you know, pride matters, and just wearing a little lapel pin or just putting a rainbow flag out in your house on occasion, I think it makes a difference, and it shows we're community without having to say anything to anybody. Symbols matter. Let's see. I do have a question from one of our participants. I recently heard a mom say that during COVID and when schools shut down, schools asked parents to oversee their children in remote learning. She did not feel equipped to teach her child geometry, but she prevailed. Now, when schools are open again, the school is asking her to butt out when it comes to the gay conversation and what books her kids read. What advice would you give that mom? Good
I
question.
would say, first off, nobody would ever tell somebody to butt out. I would say that if that mother has questions about something that her child may or may not be reading, educators develop relationships with parents, or at least strive to develop relationships with parents, so that they have the ability to have these conversations one-on-one to have a better understanding of what's going on in the classroom. So the recommendation would be to simply reach out and have that conversation with your child's teacher and if you don't have that relationship, develop that relationship, because your child's education is going to be that much better and that much more robust if that parent and that teacher have that solid relationship to ensure a child is supported through whatever they're going to be going through over those 13 years that they're in a school system.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Abigail or Hebe, you want to chime in on that?
I can just say, it's important, I think I agree everything with what was just said. Like you need to build relationships, you need to foster relations with your teachers, understand what your child is being taught. That's your right as a parent. And it also is your right to go and speak to superintendents. It's your right to email superintendents. It's your right to email principals. It's your right to email Board of Education members. It's your right to vote for your Board of Education members. So I don't want parents to feel like they don't have a say whatsoever in their children's education, because they absolutely do. They just need to take advantage of the opportunities.
Okay, great. So how do we, on this note about kids, how do we continue?
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No worries. I don't usually ever do that, but I finally did it. No, and I would just add that because I was going to say the same thing that Abigail said about, getting involved with the superintendent or speaking at the Board of Ed. I know that Rep Curry, he likes to go to the person directly, have the the conversation with them first, and then after you see if you have to escalate from there, do that. But I think like what Abigail said, it's appropriate that, we're having the opposite of this conversation that, LGBTQ parents are supposed to, kind of shut up and stay out of it. But no, they're involved in the kids' process as well, and they should have a voice equally. So I think it's important to speak up on how they feel like their voices, as well as parents, are being shut out of the process when they're right. We want all parents to have a voice. Here is an example of, it's for one and not for the other. So I think that's important to highlight.
Great. Okay. Agreed. So how do we continue to empower LGBTQ youth to feel positive about their own identity and self-worth? Abigail, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Love that question, because I am the LGBTQ youth. So I think it is really difficult because, right, I'm a member of my school's debate team. When I'm used to talking about politics, I'm used to talking about whether we should have tolls on the Merritt Parkway, whether we should have term limits for senators. But now suddenly, being a member of the queer community, I'm thrust into having a debate over whether I should exist or not, over whether my friend should be allowed to exist, over whether I should be able to allow I and my friend should be allowed to speak about who we are as people, whether we should be allowed to educate our classmates. So it can be extremely discouraging, especially, when this is a lot of people's first real thrust into politics and lawmaking. Is politics and lawmaking over whether they should have the right to live, right, or whether as themselves. So I think that the best thing that we can do is support local communities and support local organizations that remind and that provide support for queer youth directly, right? I know Joseph's runs Lighthouse, which I go to every week, every Monday in Westport. And I know a lot of other people who go there as well. But when you are able to, whether in the form of donations or in the forms of publicly promoting or in the form of just speaking positively of local organizations or working with local organizations that work directly with children, then you are showing to that child that, hey, it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, but you can't get, downtrodden, you can't get defeated by what these big scary lawmakers are saying, because the people who actually know you are the ones that care about you. The people who actually know you are the ones that are supporting you, and the ones who don't know you and the ones who don't love you are the ones that are making those decisions. And so when you're able to provide that outreach to kids directly, you're reminding the kids that this too shall pass.
And I would
Abigail, go ahead.
No, go Joseph.
I was just going to ask if Abigail, will you run for president one day? I'd vote for you.
We'll see.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess as somewhat youthful still, I'll add my comments, but I think obviously just being inclusive, is means that we're actively working to create a safe space, and welcoming spaces for all people through our words and actions is how we kind of empower LGBTQ youth. So having those signs at schools that are safe spaces, or like you mentioned with the flags and things like that, just kind of listening and affirming people, what their preferred pronouns are, and just kind of taking them for who they are and how they identify is a way to empower someone. I know that we do that in different levels as elected officials, but to bring it back to the local level, it's small things like that that really make the big difference.
And as the not youthful legislator,
yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Simply, I think the answer to this is ask. I mean, what Abigail just said, Abigail's living it. I'm 42 years old. I lived it. It's different now, but still the same. So if we want to figure it out, we just have to simply ask and be willing to listen.
Agreed. Yeah. That's something, that we practice at Lighthouse. We practice, I call it radical listening. And, a lot of kids come to our group just to offload, just to talk about what's on their mind. And, we're not in the business of telling LGBTQ youth who to be or what to be. We just sit there and listen and absorb. And we offer a free dinner and we have a lot of fun and we play games or we do art or whatever. But it's radical listening. And I see a lot of kids who don't feel heard from family or friends, and Lighthouse meetings are often oxygen for them. They just want their voice heard, and they want to be known for who they are. So when a kid comes into Lighthouse and tells me who they are, I believe them. And I think we need to do more listening than talking. So I'm proud of what we've accomplished at Lighthouse. So
and I think it's important that what you're saying is that also we have to find spaces to bring them together. So when I was in high school, I knew one gay person that was in high school with me out of 2,000.
Right.
And Connecticut is fortunate that we have the country's largest LGBTQ youth conference in the nation, and we are working to stand that up. Patrick Dunn and the folks over at the New Haven Pride Center have taken lead on this through the network's funding and other donors to get this set up next month. I remember going to these in the past years, and you see this crowd of kids who are just with their own people. And the feeling that you get from that is a feeling like you will just get from nowhere else. So yeah, the more we can do that, and I'm really glad to hear that you do that. And I just know that it's so important to kids.
Yes, and I just want to say here publicly, so that conference is happening Friday, May 21st and Saturday, May 22nd at Southern University in New Haven. So that's happening this year. It didn't happen these past couple years because of COVID. So it's being retooled and rethought, and it's going to be really great. So yeah, May 21st and 22nd in New Haven at Southern. Great. So moving on, what form and types of advocacy are needed in these challenging times to promote the need for policies that strengthen rather than negate plain old kindness and acceptance? You know, I feel like we're in such a fighting against just, you know, it's just so rude and wrong. So many, what we're seeing.
I think we need to work towards getting away from this like identity politics that just super polarizes everyone. And what's happening right now is that we're simply pawns in a much larger game. And
Agreed.
we are the collateral consequence of this fight that's happening at a national level, at a state level, and at a local level. And to be used in that manner, it happened to us last night here in the State House during a debate on a bill that simply just added folks to the network, the LGBTQ network that we talked about earlier. That turned into about a 45-hour debate where folks who have certain feelings stood up on that floor and talked about not putting us in boxes, separating us out, doesn't think it's worthy to have a table full of LGBTQ youth or people who understand the challenges of our community, simply to get up and probably post some sort of Facebook, Twitter video to be able to go and collect likes from their followers. I mean, it's when you witness it like that in person, it is absolutely disgusting. And so I think we have to find ways to be able to push back on just being a part, forced to kind of play this role in this larger game of folks just trying to win rather than seeking out truth and justice. I know it sounds so like cliche as I say it out loud, but it's true. I mean, it's to the core who we are. So it's just gross. So finding a way to push back on that is first and foremost what we need to be doing.
I think that I guess the testimony that helps push back though too is when it comes from people that it affects, you know. I think because when you have people just basically stating their own opinion about what they think the facts are, then it gets kind of crazy. But when someone speaks from the floor of the House or testifies on a bill about something that affects them when they have their own story, I think kind of like the room gets silent, right? And they're focused and they can kind of hear and humanize the issue. And, it makes it a little harder for the other side or the opposition to, vote no. But it really has to come from that place of, it's, and it takes a lot, right? It takes a lot of energy and your own, takes a lot of guts to speak up and speak out. But, Jeff Curry and I do not identify as trans, and, how much we'd love to have a trans, member of the General Assembly, to help us with these bills. And that's just kind of like, we're still trying to work on representation. But for us, I think, when we push back on these bills, it's coming from the human side of here's my story and here's how it affects me and why I matter.
Yeah, I just want to jump in. I feel like LGBTQ, many in the LGBTQ community and especially LGBTQ youth are being used in these wedge issues. And we talk about culture wars, and they're being used to divide us and make, them and us kind of situation where we're vilified. And I feel like, no, I read all these articles about, what's happening all over the country. And I'm like, no, that's not true. No. That's not me. That's not my life. And it's so disheartening to see. And I think it's, politics at its most vile, and most, it's really, they're scapegoating us and we're a wedge issue.
Yeah, and we've been very fortunate in Connecticut that we're able to promote those policies that do strengthen rather than negate that kindness and acceptance that you mentioned earlier. But slowly it's creeping in. I mean, for folks, folks joke and say, "Oh, that's the South, that happens." No. We have parts of Connecticut in which we call the Up South, because that stuff is happening right here and right now. And even as recently as a couple of weeks ago, there was the announcement of the new independent PAC, Political Action Committee, called Parents Against Stupid Stuff, in which they declared that a rich white man from Fairfield is going to spend about $1 million making trans athletes, amongst other things, a wedge issue for the election in November. Do you know what we could do with $1 million for our youth?
Yeah.
Give me that money and let us do some good with that. Because what you're doing is a waste of time. And it's solely to get votes, solely to pull people aside, to divide and conquer as they see it. And we're not going to let that happen. But the fact that that's here is just a reminder that it is everywhere. So it's more important than ever that we kind of stand up and we coalesce around one another and that we have our voice united moving forward.
Yeah, there are two kind of ways to look at any, like political based issue, at least in my eyes. There's cases where the two side or the parties agree that it's a problem and it's what's the best way to solve the problem, or it's they disagree that there's a problem in the first place. And so I think that, we're definitely on the latter of the two in that that they are trying to solve people who are going against a lot of these bills, a lot of people are going against a lot of this representation are trying to solve a problem that simply does not exist. They're trying to, fix some, issue that they only they perceive to be an issue. So by getting more representation and by kind of showing the people, who are putting these people, by showing the people who are, doing elections, by showing, constituents that, the individuals who are trying to pass and are trying to creep these bills into, Connecticut, that they are that the issue that they are discussing is not really an issue. And that's something that, we can work at anywhere within our government, anywhere within our, electing body.
Great. So, Abigail, you were telling me recently about some peer mentoring that you and Riley were doing and others in your GSA group were doing at AITE. So as young people are increasingly more open and supportive, and also we have more and more vocal allies, are there ways to use young people to educate us adults in their communities?
Absolutely. And I think the most important thing is showing that, in my experience, as a young person, showing that we care, showing what issues we care about. I know right when Joseph introduced me, he mentioned that I was a part of AIT for AB, which was a huge panel that was dedicated solely to getting student voices heard about scheduling issues within the school. And the Board of Ed, I think, went from something like a 5-4 against our schedule that we wanted to a 7-2 in favor of the schedule that we wanted. And that wasn't because of course, parents helped, but that wasn't because teachers spoke out against it. That wasn't because parents spoke out against it. That is because students themselves wrote emails, students themselves, developed their own full hour-long panel. Students ourselves protested in front of the government center to show that this is something that we care about. And then we turned a partisan issue about scheduling and whether we should have trust in a superintendent into a bipartisan issue of listening to our students and listening to the children that were speaking. So I think that if you want students to have a voice, if you want students to have that kind of say in our government and educating people who are making these legislative decisions, then all you have to do is convince those people to listen to the students, because we have been and we are more than willing to talk.
Okay. And it worked for you. I mean, did you see an amicable solution to the problem at AITE?
Absolutely. We went from, again, I said this, we went from a split Board of Ed, Republicans versus Democrats, to a bipartisan, what do the students say? We went from a, superintendent that was, saying that, we went from a superintendent and a principal that was saying, you guys are wrong, we have facts on our side, to we understand that the facts might not be applicable, let's work out a different solution. And we were only able to do that because we had, a large portion of the student body, and we had thankfully a board of education and a superintendent and a principal that were willing to listen to us. Without them, wanting to hear what we had to say, our plans for our schedule would never have gotten implemented.
Well, I know you're on the debate team there, so I'm sure you made a compelling argument or helped to make it. So I wasn't there, but I'm guessing. So moving on, many youth are increasingly struggling with mental health issues. I see them all the time in Lighthouse. I hear a lot of kids talking about that. They're talking about depression and anxiety, and with many LGBTQ youth are particularly vulnerable. What are ways to get the word out that help is available? Like, how do we best communicate that? How do we talk to the youth that need to hear us the most?
So Representative Ali, Brennan, and I, literally before jumping onto this, voted for the most comprehensive child mental health package that this state has ever seen before. And what that's going to do is that is going to increase access to care, whether that is at all levels of care and for all varieties of folks in the systems. It is now going to be incumbent upon us to be able to get that information out to folks at all levels so that there is an understanding of what will be available. A lot of it is through our school systems, which we know are the first line of defense, or the first folks who are having these conversations when our youth are in need of some of these additional supports. So there's going to be a lot of education at that level that will be necessary. But we heard some of the most compassionate stories that really kind of just tug on that heart to make you understand why we do some of the stuff that we get to do here and that we're fortunate to do to be able to better support the youth throughout Connecticut. And so over the next couple of months, we're hoping to really get that message out and have folks know that there is a place, there are people, and we're going to help you get better. So that will happen today? That literally just happened, that the House voted on it. It's House Bill 5001. And now it makes its way to the Senate for their debate, and then onto the governor's desk for his signature. Are you optimistic? Absolutely, absolutely. This is tens of millions of dollars that we are investing in this. Like I said, it is the most comprehensive and the largest investment that we have made like this ever. Awesome. Sometimes I feel like we live in a bubble in Connecticut. I don't know. I love the state. I've made it my home, and I grew up in Massachusetts. But sometimes I feel like, this isn't the norm. This is, like what's happening in Texas and Florida and other states are, that's the norm. I don't know. Sometimes I think we're in a little liberal bubble here, or I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know how to describe it.
Well, and Joseph, I would also add that, obviously there's other resources like nationally, like the Trevor Project, which provides a national 24-hour toll-free confidential suicide hotline. There's also the It Gets Better Project, which, is a campaign to share hopeful and, inspiring stories. So there's national, hotlines and resources as well that focus on the LGBTQ community, but also, we're doing as much as we can on the state level to support those efforts.
Yeah, and I think it's, of course, I'm talking a lot about the student perspective here. We've got, two great politicians to discuss everything else. But from the perspective of being a student, I don't say this like, this is going to sound bad. I don't do this to, call out shame to like my principal or my school's administration. I just say that's just a sad reflective of our society. I've been in my school for 4 years. Morning announcements every single day. Not once has any mental health hotline or any mental health resources really been listed on our morning announcements or been in any announcements really by our administration, at least that I can remember. And so the mental health support for my school in particular, which thankfully does have good support and information, comes from student clubs and organizations, comes from, the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council, comes from my school's GSA, that all, provide information. And, if we can't provide resources ourselves, then we provide ways through, numbers, other information like that to get resources for these students. And I think that, as amazing as I would love to say teenagers are, being one myself, I think that, when we are putting the burden of informing and assisting mental health on our teenagers, on our students who already suffer from a lot of these problems themselves, as Joseph mentioned, then we have a problem that the ones who have the problems are the same ones who are trying to treat it. So that's why, from a student's perspective, bills like what, our two representatives here just tried to pass are so important, because they are putting the resources in the hands of the people who actually have the training and who actually have the degrees and who actually have the ability to treat, the students who need it.
I just want to add along those lines, Kids in Crisis, which oversees my Lighthouse LGBTQ youth group, runs a 24/7 hotline, crisis hotline. So any child, or if you have a concern about a child, you can call that line. It's for parents, it's for concerned community members. It's 203-661-1911, 203-661-1911, and you can call that number anytime. And we have access to licensed clinical social workers, psychologists, all kinds of experts ready to help. So if you're in a crisis, give us a call. We're happy to help.
Real quick, and I know, Abigail, you have probably got enough homework, but can I give you some more homework? Would you actually ask your principal to include that in the morning announcements and see what you get for a response? And maybe report back and maybe start a new trend that they'll start including that kind of information, just generally letting folks know that there is help out there should they so need it.
I love to. I have an open line with my principal because I do a lot of stuff around the school. So I think it's, I'll give it a shot and we'll see what happens.
Awesome. Thank you. Great idea. Here's a question. There's somebody's just typed a question in for us. What can we in Connecticut do better for youth and families from states where laws are going in the other direction? Yeah, I mean, I have so many friends in Florida and Texas, and I feel helpless. I feel bad for them.
Yeah, so I haven't had a chance to talk to Rep. Curry about this, but I know, we're reaching the end of the legislative session here, so we can't really introduce any new bills. But I do know of another state senator from California, Scott Wiener. He's introducing a bill that would basically make California a refuge state, for trans children and families. And so the bill would kind of shield trans kids and their families from civil and criminal penalties, imposed by anti-trans healthcare bans. So in Texas, families that are trying to get gender affirming care for their kids, if they came to Connecticut for things like that, they'd be shielded here and their families wouldn't be penalized. And so we kind of did something similar with an abortion bill previously this session. And so I think that's something great that we could commit to for next session. But on the local level, I think it's obviously, something we have to do to see just reaching out. It's kind of does feel a little hopeless on the local level, but I think there are some options for us to do legislatively.
Yeah, and I'm glad he mentioned those. We have some concerns over what those proposals are and what those may mean actually for current laws and protections that we have in place here in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll actually have probably some good news to share in the next coming days on some of the stuff that Representative Ali Brennan just spoke about. But I think first and foremost, for folks that live in those states, I think all too often we simply say, well, come here. We shouldn't have to say that. They should be able to live where they want and to be able to feel like that is a safe space for them. And so if it is, if you have a couple dollars to spare, finding that local organization in that state, in that county, in that city, who is doing some of the work that you're doing, Joseph, like find those people and better support them in those communities But also, you know, Rab and I, we have a network of legislators throughout the country that we're able to connect with and share policies that we've been able to pass and offer up our supports and ways that we can help them get their members to better understand some of these protections and laws that we have been able to put in place here in Connecticut. And hopefully that just kind of becomes kind of a domino effect where, you know, one state is taking care of it and you just check it off the list and you just move down the coast, and hopefully we'll be able to capture it all throughout every state and provide the protections that we have here in Connecticut.
Mm.
Yeah, I love that term, a refuge state, you know, that the term coined for California. And you know, I fear as these laws get traction, you know, that we might be coming, you know, like this blue state, red state, you know, I hope it becomes more purple, but I don't know. It's you know, LGBTQ people are victimized, and you know, again, we're being, I feel like we're being used as scapegoats and wedge being part of wedge issues. So I hope that traction like that gains in a lot of the red states where we're seeing some of these laws being enacted. So. All right, well, thank you. If anybody else want to add anything else to this conversation, I am out of questions. You've all been so wonderful and fabulous. I thank you for your time. If anybody else want to wind up, finish us off with some comments or some final thoughts.
I would say, you know, if anybody is interested in advocacy at the state or local level, definitely reach out to us, and we can help connect you with folks in your community. Representation matters. Representation matters. Representation matters. Run for office. Let your voice be heard. We need some more folks up here. Rahab and I are doing it, and we're doing it well, but we don't want to just be doing it, the two of us. So hopefully get involved now, get involved early, and run.
Again, and I would just add, you know, like I said too, I think, you know, remaining vigilant means a lot of things. It could mean serving legislature. It could mean, you know, speaking out at a, you know, parent teacher conference. It could, you know, it can mean just being yourself. And, you know, I know firsthand growing up, you know, I struggled with who I was for a long time, and, you know, prayed the gay way, or tried to at least. And, you know, now I'm an openly gay member of the Connecticut legislature, and I'm fighting for equal protections under the law for everyone. And so I never could have imagined, you know, even being on this, you know, conference right now that we're having. But I think, you know, you have to take the leap, and it's up to all of us to kind of look out for each other, because an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. So, you know, obviously Jeff and I are here to help, but it's going to take all of us.
Absolutely, yes. You know, the sixth grade closeted me would be, you know, looking up at this Zoom call, probably laughing at, you know, 12th grade out me right now, you know, thinking like, you know, is this really, you know, what you're fighting for? Is this what you ended up with your life? Is this what you're doing with your life? And, you know, I'd say to that younger me, absolutely. And you'll learn that later than you should have. As I, you know, the first time I spoke at this panel, the first thing I said was that the battle is half legal and the battle is half cultural. I'm not legally allowed to vote yet. Unfortunately, I wish I could. I'll be in the polls this November though. But that doesn't mean that my battle starts when I'm 18. That just means that I get new resources when I'm 18. Absolutely everybody in the war, everybody, no matter who you are, no matter where, no matter whether you can vote, no matter whether you can't vote, you absolutely can make change. And, you know, the best part about just being representative, the best part of showing whether you're a member of the community or whether you're an ally is you never know who you're helping. You never know who doesn't have parents at home when that they can talk to. You never know who has support systems at home. So even right, you know, Representative Curry, I don't know, you know, excuse me, I can't, you know, as much as I wish I could, I can't watch every single debate in the House of Representatives. But, you know, I know, you know, walk around with like the rainbow pin on, You know, even if that's just like on the sidewalk on your way to get a Starbucks in the morning, you never know what kid you pass by sees that there are adults out there, that there are people out there who care about them, that, you know, even if their particular district, even if their particular school, even if their particular home and family life isn't going the way that they would prefer it to, showing that their view of the world is not the entire world, and that they in time will be able to find their people, and they in time will be able to stand with those who fight for them, is so important, just for ensuring that our kids can, you know, that, you know, our kids, that myself, that my peers can feel function, that our kids, that when they get the right to vote, they don't have apathy, that they feel that their votes can have real impact, that they know that there are people out there who really do care for them. So whether you know, however public it may be, any way that you can show your allyship, any way that you can show your love of this, you know, community that we're a part of, I guarantee will help someone.
Jeff and Rahib, will we see you at Pride in the Park in Norwalk, perhaps, coming up in June? I think it's in June. I'm not sure. I don't know the exact date of it. It's run by the Triangle Community Center. Are you familiar with Pride in the Park in Norwalk?
Yeah, I have not been down to that one before, but we try to make the circuit during June.
Yeah, it's a busy month for, yeah.
I've been down, and I used to be on Triangle's board, so I was trying to get more resources up to Danbury area, but they're great, and it is a fun time.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to that, especially it was on hiatus for the last 2 years because of COVID. So it'll be a much needed get together outdoors. So listen, everyone, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I know you're busy. I know you're in session right now, but thank you, everybody. We will be doing more of these. I appreciate your voices, and I appreciate that everything that you all do. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.